Representing people in hundreds of jury trials, Nathaniel Lee is who you want by your side in the courtroom. You've seen the rest, now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cosell, and Feigley today. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Thank you so much for joining us from the different states. We got a jam-packed agenda today, as always. There's so many things that occur in the news. It's difficult to start, but one of the things I need to tell the folks in Indianapolis, Indiana, early voting has started. And like here in Indianapolis, we have a lot of contested races. In the congressional race, our only Black candidate, Andre Carson, has been challenged. And I just read today in the paper that his opponent apparently outraised him in money this last quarter. It was pretty fascinating to me to see that, based on the fact that I thought that she lives in Martinsville. I'm trying to figure out, why is a Martinsville person trying to represent people in Indianapolis? It was just odd. But in any event, make sure that you go out and vote. Voting already started. We have our superstar panel today. We have Attorney Vanita Banks, Master in Tax, Cyber Security Expert, Marlon Prime, former Department of Justice, and the famous Milton Grimes, who represented Rodney King. So because Attorney Banks is involved in a meeting in Chicago, we'll start off with her. Hey, tell us about the meeting that you're involved in, Attorney Banks, up in Chicago. What's going on?
Good morning, Attorney Lee. I am just so pleased to join you here in Chicago from Power Rising. I'm attending the Power Rising conference, colleagues, in Chicago, and we've convened over 500 women from over 400 states. And we've convened to build our collective agenda, our strategies, support each other, and lead our families and our communities. This is an intergenerational collective of women leaders that are assembled here in Chicago to talk about the important and critical issues impacting our communities. And we're here to leverage our collective power. All of the Divine Nine women sororities are here. Civic, social, and faith-based organizations are here. And we're here to leverage, again, our collective power and to turn our power into action, because we know that this time that we're in is calling for collective action and moving forward on our agenda. We're here with Lieutenant Governor Stratton. Juliana Stratton will be joining us today. Right now, our Illinois House of Representatives member Robin Kelly is participating on a panel regarding women's health equity, along with so many others, including Star Jones, attorney, advocate, and host of Divorce Court. It's really a wonderful gathering. We are rooted in power, and we are Power Rising.
Do you think that your group will be able to put forth a significant effort to increase turnout? We have an important midterm election this year, probably the most important midterm during my lifetime, particularly with the constitutional issues at stake. Are your group planning to help out in that endeavor?
Absolutely. Everyone here and across all of the organizations that are here today, we are united in an effort to educate, inform, register, and mobilize the vote on not just during the presidential elections, but in every election, Attorney Lee. We want to transform elections. They're not just an event, but they are something that we should be doing each and every time. And so we know that all politics is local. And so we have to vote in every election. And so we are mobilized to protect the vote, to register our communities, to mobilize and turn the vote out on election day, as well as to protect the vote from all of these national efforts to suppress our vote. We also have a specific campaign that is focused on opposing the SAVE Act, which the SAVE Act is a solution without a problem. And so we know that non-citizen voter fraud is so extremely rare as to be almost non-existent. And so we've asked everyone, and we're asking all of our callers to please contact your member of Congress and advocate that they oppose the SAVE Act.
Thank you. But this week, Marlon and Milton, we had so many adverse national news that was negative, particularly for Black men. It seems like, the tip of the hat, probably one that gathered the most headline, was that tragic event that occurred in Virginia with Justin Fairfax um, killing his wife and then himself. And it looked like, and even in LA, I see that the David Singer found a body inside of his Tesla. He got arrested. So it looked like we have an avalanche of these killings. What's going on?
Well, good morning, everybody, and certainly good to be part of your program, Nathaniel, and good morning to everybody, Milton and Vanita. This is just a tragedy, and this was a rising star in Virginia politics. Had what appeared to be the perfect family. A wife was a dentist. They both were highly educated, but I think it just kind of goes to the issue of we can't do this all ourselves. And I think it's been a stigma in the African American community about mental health issues. And if you look at some of the press reports about Mr. Fairfax, he had a scandal, and that derailed his chance of being governor. But I just think your people in the audience, they just have to understand that life doesn't end because you don't get something that you want. You just have to redouble your efforts. But he seemed to just be fixated on that, and it just really had him spiral into a deep depression. He had a law degree, and I think he did a case. I think a wrongful death got a decent verdict, but just wasn't able to increase his law practice. Was basically destitute. Then his wife divorced him, and they're in the midst of the divorce, and the divorce is about to be finalized. So, Milton, I know probably has a lot more experience than I, but, oftentimes we represent people that have a lot of challenges. And, it's important that as attorneys, and not only as attorneys, but just as African Americans, we need to just pull down this stigma. It is okay. You don't have to be Superman or Superwoman. You can, ask for some assistance, get somebody professional. And oftentimes, my other pet peeve is that oftentimes we rely upon our pastor. That's great, but there's a lot of things that pastors can't resolve. Some of these issues, you need a trained psychiatrist. You might need psychotropic medication. I might need depression medication. You might need somebody to talk to. And, I hope from this tragedy, each of us, I'm sure, knows somebody who's struggling. This guy, Jason Fairfax, he wasn't changing his clothes. I mean, they said that, his place was a mess. I mean, we've all seen these warning signs, and hopefully we can be a blessing, not only to our families, our friends, and our clients, that they don't get to this point.
I ditto what Marvin said. I don't know the intimate facts. I didn't know about he was being disheveled, or he wasn't changing his clothes, and he was not keeping himself up, like those kind of details. But he's living there at the same house with his wife, and he's ordered to be out by the end of this month. Don't know what arrangements he had to deal with that. I think he had separated from somehow his law firm. He was a partner there. So sometime Marvin and Nathaniel and Benita, when you trip and fall, that hole can be very deep or shallow, but still it's a hole that one is in, and it takes a lot of willpower and determination to get back up sometime. And you are going to go through battles of depression. And if no one is there for that critical moment that you go down again, anything can happen. Yes, the Black community is short on mental health education and experience, I think, more so than other communities. No, I should not say that. There are a lot of other ethnic groups that I have met and come in contact with that don't believe in psychology at all. I do believe in psychology, and thankfully I've seen how admitting to a mistake and putting it on the table for a problem, sometimes you can see that problem not as big as you thought it was before you just decided to open up with it. And I could go on the whole program about my personal life, Nate, but and a lot of us are not fortunate enough to be able to see that, to see the benefit of putting it on the table and saying, let's deal with it. I was motivated 2 days ago, not 2 days, 2 days ago, with my granddaughter. She, her sister went to Yale, scholarship at Yale, and she's right behind her. Beautiful kid, 4.3 grade point average. Her mom was saying, oh yeah, when Mia said when they mentioned in social history or history Rodney King case, she was embarrassed to mention that her grandpa was Rodney King's lawyer because you got convicted of not paying your taxes. I said, what? She said, yeah. I said, wow. So it hit me pretty hard that she would be embarrassed to acknowledge that her grandfather was intimate in that case, a historical case. So while I was away, I did some writing and some reading, and I decided to go back over some of my writing because I haven't finished, to talk about when I had the King case, that I remember Johnny and I arguing about settling the case and how LA wouldn't pay him any money. And my position was maintained by he and I and some other guys in that discussion. I'd rather try this case than lose it than to deal it out for less than what I think it's worth. The value of this case and what it means to Black history. And so now I have a granddaughter who don't want to speak of her grandfather. So I didn't mean to go on and on, but if you don't know the intimate situation of people, they can end up in situations like this. But again, we sometimes put pride before better sense. And sadly, that's what Fairfax, I believe, has done here at that moment. He just lost it.
Well, Attorney Grimes, it's so true that an attorney Primes, it's so true that in the Black community, there's been a long-standing stigma attached to and associated with mental illness. And I think it's very unfortunate as well that there's a concept that I'm sharing with you today, and it's called intimate partner violence, or IPV. And it's a serious, deadly public health epidemic involving abusive, coercive, or violent behavior within romantic relationships, either current or former, married couples, or dating couples. It can affect anyone. No one is immune, regardless of social status, age, income, race, or sexual orientation. And intimate partner violence is a tool used to gain power and control over the other party, causing lasting emotional trauma. Sometimes there's PTSD disorder, and ultimately and tragically can result in death. Some of the risk factors include the perpetrators having a history of childhood abuse, criminal activity, high stress levels, substance abuse, or financial instability. And there are, the signs are manifested in either physical or sexual violence, stalking, psychological aggression, verbal abuse, humiliation, and in some cases, financial control, restricting another's access to money, and then, of course, social isolation from, family and friends. And it's important to know that there is help out there, and there's the National Domestic Violence Hotline. That number is 800-799-7233. 7233 translates into safe. And also for our veterans, there is a Veterans Partner Violence Assistance Program, which provides resources and support to veterans. And so this situation with Mr. and Mrs. Fairfax is just so tragic. And I wanted to share some of these resources. We have to begin to talk about this and take action, because this is becoming a deadly public health epidemic in our communities.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is that I never forget one of my wife's late friends. She went on a trip with us, and she said, "Hey, I'd never been around couples before." And the point is, I'm not excusing any bad behavior, but I think, men, even women, when we're raising kids, we got to, reinforce what a good relationship looks like, and reinforce that. And in addition to not really talking about mental health, I don't think we do as good a job training up our men, our young men. Hey, what a healthy relationship looks like. No means no. Not stalking someone, letting someone make the decision. If they don't want you, keep it moving. So I think there do need to be better conversations. I know a lot of our fraternity organizations are involved in projects like that, but I think, more needs to be done, because I think Attorney Banks makes a good point that, we want these tragedies to stop. You don't own anybody because you go with them. They still have a mind of their own. And, we just have to trumpet that, especially as Black men, and especially when we're raising children, because unfortunately now, we're not seeing those healthy relationships enough.
Hey, you know what? There's something that's very important, and Milton probably can echo this, is that in all of the cases that I've seen in terms of these domestic violence issues, it was conduct that started earlier that escalated. In other words, in all the cases that I'm personally aware of, I remember representing a young lady in a divorce case, and we won the case at trial on a Friday, and then Friday night, the husband murdered her after we won the case in the courtroom. But the violence didn't start on the day that she died. It was a series of events, and I always told my clients, you gotta report it and move on. I know it's difficult, but that was been my experience. I don't know about you, Milton, or Benita, but it was a series of events that escalated. It was not a final event. It was all types of clinical signs that tell you that this is going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I guess I through my personal experience in it, because I think mental illness covers a lot of spectrums and not just the intimate relationships of a couple. We have a problem with it across the board, dealing with terminal illnesses and different financial situations and a lot of problems in our life. And it's just that I remember sitting with a group of men not long ago and discussing an intimate thing about myself. And one of the brothers said, "Hey man, that's what did he say? That's too much to know about." I go, "What?" He said, "That's too revealing. I can't talk about something like that." And my position was, that's what's wrong. We got to be able to open up and talk about intimate things to each other as grown men, Black men have. And we just seem to be a little bit slow at realizing.
Attorneys, we have a caller.
Okay, caller, you have a question or comment for us today?
Good morning, everyone. Brother Imhotep here. Good morning. And thank you for taking my call. I was traveling last couple of days and I encountered the news what had happened.
This Pierre?
But, no, this is Brother Imhotep. How you doing there?
How you doing?
All right. Can you hear me? All right, good. Yeah, and when I encountered the news, and of course, just gut wrenching when you hear anything like that. I've worked in mental health when I was first out of college, and you are right. I don't want us to label Black people, please. There are a lot of people, period. To be honest, after 31 years in health, working as a healthcare professional, I worked probably off and on well over 10 years in mental health, inpatient mental health, to be honest. The least amount of people I saw in inpatient or even outpatient settings were from my Latino brethren or from my Arabic or Islamic brethren. Other than that, there's plenty of white people in inpatient and outpatient treatment. I know, they kind of slide by and things always get dumped on us when there's an issue. But, in my experience, those are the two groups that I very rarely saw. Now, that could be cultural, where they don't tell or go seek treatment. We know sometimes, that they really keep things close to the vest. But I think all of us need someone we can go talk to. That's what I'm trying to get at. We can talk to when we need to talk to. And it's pastors. I know people run to pastors. They're not equipped. But going talking about you believe in psychology. Psychology has its purpose. But when I studied the early psychologists, and then when I studied the Black psychiatrists and psychologists, the APA, which was mainly your white psychologists, they never listened to Black psychologists. Price and Greer, Kenneth, the one with the dog test, Kenneth, and his wife, Mamie Clark, Dr. Kenneth Clark, Mamie Clark, all those pioneers that were Black at the time kept telling them that they were racist in their approach. You look at most of them, all your early century psychologists, they were racist. They never, remember, Julian Lewis had to write a book called The Biology of the Negro, because they actually wrote that we had different brains, we were just different people than them. So it's deep, it's a deep subject. It's really a deep subject. It'll take years to probably learn, but from a cursory perspective, all I want to communicate to anyone, if you need to talk to someone, it could be a stranger at the bus stop that could save you or anyone else. Just talk to them, and let's stop using violence as a means to solve any of our issues, because the last thing I want to put out is we still haven't been able to get anyone to be held accountable for being pedophiles and doing what they did to women in those Epstein files. And so, America has a problem. The world may have a problem, but we need to really stay on this and get people who do things to all people, especially our innocent people, women, children. Because when I grew up, the thing is, even the dudes on the streets would tell you, man, don't bother women, children, and elderly. That was just off the limit. If it was between two men, okay, two men got to figure it out. But women, children, and elder, you ain't supposed to bother. Now, those rules have been thrown out the window. Thanks for taking my call.
Well, this issue of domestic violence is not exclusive to the Black community. In fact, about 75% of all these homicides are committed by white males. However, this one with the dentist, Miss Fairfax, successful dental enterprise, pillar in the community, two great kids. It just hurts because you see rising stars in our community that are essentially murdered, and so you look back and you say, what could be done to avoid this? And so I think that as citizens, to the panel, I think the key thing, what Milton said, you have to talk to somebody about it, but also based on what Marlon was saying, there were some clinical signs that this guy was not with it. And Milton always say, lose their mind. I guess that's criminal offense, but what I see is ongoing signs and symptoms that the person going to do harm to himself or someone else, and sometimes it's predictable. And but you have to deal with it in early stages, in my opinion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think one thing, especially hopefully we have, young listeners out there. I think one of the greatest speeches I heard, a graduation speech by Savannah Guthrie when my son graduated. And it kind of goes to this question. She said, through the prism of time, things at that moment may think that, hey, this is the worst thing that ever could happen to me. And I think Savannah's like, through the prism of time, you'll say, no, it's not. Life happens and you can get up. It has its ebbs and has its flows. And I think sometimes, we just, look at problems and look at them as unsurmountable. I think the second problem is that we can't define yourself by your accomplishments or your career. I happen to be a lawyer, but I do a lot of other things. And then the other thing, I think the final thing is that, careers or accomplishments and awards, those are fine. But at the reality of it, nobody in their deathbed is going to be talking about that. The most important thing is going to be your relationships, where you went, what you did, who you spent that time with. And I think we got to really reinforce to our young people what is important. You certainly have to maintain yourself, maintain a career, be professional, but make sure that you maintain the other side of yourself to the extent you can in terms of your family, in terms of your loved ones. Finally, I was fortunate to work as a federal prosecutor. And I tell my kids, I was very busy, but I said, hey, in your life, any important event, if somebody pulled back a picture, whether it's sports, track, play, if they pull back, your mom or your dad were there. And that's the stuff that's really important. And we got to just send that message to our young people that at the end of the day, that's all that's going to matter.
Okay,
We have a caller.
Yeah, go ahead, caller. You have a question or comment for us today? Go ahead, Pierre.
This is Pierre. Renee made a great point in the comments, and I didn't read the judge's order. I just saw it quoted in news reports. But the things that the judge wrote, if he was that disturbed, and he used some disturbing language like spiraling and fatalism, and I don't understand why the judge didn't order the man be held for an evaluation of some sort. They throw guys in jail all the time for late child support payments. It's really it leaves you scratching your head. But you know, that's my only question.
Well, the judge can only go on what he's got before him at the time. Looking back, you know, in the mirror, yeah, you can see a lot of things that you didn't see when you were making a decision and trying to be fair to both sides. Maybe they presented themselves as being able to stay within their home for a period of time and stay away from each other in the home. The home is large enough, basement, uh, man room, and all of that these days. So they just presented an argument to the court or a position to the court that changed with maybe an argument that night, late at night, and got out of hand. So that's how it is.
Well, the judge used some pretty strong language. That, you know, some people probably got put on a 2-day hold for a lot less. But yeah, well, thanks for that. I'll let somebody else call in. Thank you.
Well, one of the things too, you got to remember is that when people come to court, how you speak, how you dress, how you communicate to the court is paramount. Two people can commit the same criminal offense, and one person sentence be 50% lighter than the other based on how they present themselves to the court. No, we had all types of hearings and stuff that they're televising, and I saw part of the hearing of Sharon, the Michigan football fire coach, and it was very telling. The judge went through the process as to why he gave him, I think, 18 months probation. And it was really interesting to hear the judge's reasoning for giving him 18 months probation. But primarily, he congratulated Sharon Moore's wife. Now, I don't know about Milton. That was just a rarity for me. I listened to that. I said, and that was an interesting speech the judge gave. And so that was one of the few times that I've seen where the focus deviated from the defendant to the defendant's spouse to save his butt from getting executed time. I was watching that. I said, now that's different. I don't know. I just thought it was just kind of odd.
Well, he was accused of having a relationship with one of the female students at the school, right?
Well, it was a staffer. He had hired her. She came into the program at a lower salary. She started having an extramarital affair and a salary, I think, double. And so I'm unsure of what were the circumstances led him to go berserk, I guess. And I'm not sure of the facts because I'm still, to me, the case is a little bit cloudy as to exactly what he did.
He confronted her with something about, I'm sorry, Nate, he confronted her about bringing it public and something from what I remember reading. Maybe the judge was thinking his wife that she could have taken it further. I don't know.
Well, in that case, he was apprehended. He was arrested.
Yeah.
After he had threatened to kill himself and injure his former assistant girlfriend at her home.
The accuser, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it was complicated.
But the point about that is that it was just an odd point of departure as to the sentence reduction language.
Right.
He thanked his wife for being there with him and her strength and support of her cheating husband. You know, just bizarre to me. I just thought, but
maybe that was good that he recognized her to say, thank you for not doing what we would have expected you to do, or something like that. I don't know.
Well, showing up in the courtroom after he did that's probably what he was probably speaking to, because I know a lot of wives, probably mine included, would not be too happy about that, and so
her showing up was part of the legal strategy.
Wow.
But a lot of wives wouldn't do it.
Fortunately or unfortunately.
Okay, we had another caller. Go ahead, caller. That's legal strategy. Okay, caller, you have a question or comment for us? Go ahead.
Probably both. This is Renee from New York City. I just want to say, as a Black woman, we are probably one of the most endangered, people in the United States. We just are. We get it from Blackness. We get it from being the gender that we are. So I've seen it, and I've been in an abusive relationship. So I can tell you this. Until people start recognizing or acknowledging that we have a serious problem with some men's behavior. And I don't want Mr. Fairfax to be the poster child for mental health care for Black men, because that he's different. Now, not every man or Black man who has mental health issues goes out and kills their wife in front of their children. That was anger. That was about control. That man was like, I'm not going to let you live, and I'm going to make everybody else suffer after that, and I'm going to go too, so I don't face any punishment. Yes, part of that might be mental health, but it is also about control. That was control. I've been, I've seen men angry, but that doesn't mean they're going to go kill me or kill somebody that they're with. Everybody has a right to be angry, to have an emotion. But this is way different. I've seen men with mental health issues, and they don't hurt people. And so I don't want him to become the poster child for Black male health care, mental health care. There are a lot more people out there that we can talk about that, there's some football players that talked about the mental health that they were going through, and they didn't hurt their partner. They didn't, or hurt their children. So that's the only thing I have to say about that. And there are a lot of angry Black women online who are feeling that way because they took the focus off the victims, and all of a sudden he is propped up as an example. No, the example should be that this woman was being abused at home, apparently enough that the judge says you have to be out by the end of April, and that this man was unstable because nobody took her seriously. Nobody took that situation. I'm sure because he was used to be a congressperson, he walked in there with his suit on or whatever, and the judge was like, well, he used to be a congressperson. So, although I'm seeing some warning signs, I'm not going to make this man leave right away. And she probably, and knowing, I'm sorry,
I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
And have friends go through some divorce proceedings, I could imagine that she was probably not going to want to leave her house to be safe, because if you have children and you leave in some cases, and I've had family members go through this, if you leave your house as the spouse, the female spouse, the caretaker of the children, if you leave your house for so many days, your partner gets to claim that house. They can say you abandoned it. Now, y'all could tell me if I'm wrong because you're the attorneys, but I've seen my family members go through, I can't leave because if I leave for so many days, that would be considered abandoning the property, and I no longer can live in it with the children. So I don't know if that was the situation. I don't know all the intimate details. I just know what I'm reading, just like Pierre. But there was so many signs that man should not have stayed in that house as long as he did. Now, that's my opinion on that, and I'll listen to hear your response. But I did want to talk about one other subject on that line. There's a news story that broke that there is an online group of men, like 62 million. That's crazy to think there's 62 million men who are interested in learning how to rape their wives and their partners, or get off on the idea of doing that. That is just crazy. We have a serious problem in this country and the world of men who want to dominate women and take us back to, I guess, slavery time. Okay, I'll listen. Thank you.
I'm sure the judge or the wife would have presented the court with some information to show that he was a danger. I haven't heard anything about that being presented to the court and allowing them to stay together until the end of the month. So I suspect that maybe the wife saw a lot of things about him, but she didn't see this type of conduct by him. And I say that and say, have you ever been in a position where you got so angry about a moment that you snapped and had something like a blackout? Well, I have. And it's a dangerous position. It's a dangerous thing to happen, but you can do things that you would never believe you would do in a totally conscious state. I'm not trying to be, anyway, that's just a fact of life. And I've dealt with enough people who can discuss that situation. Marlon, I'm sure you've dealt with it in criminal law too, that you say, why would this fool do something like, why would they do this? Why would they do that? There's that moment where the brain snaps or blacks out. And it's a momentary thing, but you can do some horrendous things in that moment that you would not normally do. But it's 10 seconds of your life that destroys all the years you put together. So having seen that and experienced that myself, I understand how people can do bizarre things that the rest of us don't understand. How could this person do that? Why didn't we see that? We should have seen that. Well, it ain't always that simple, folks. That's how it happens. She didn't see that, I'm sure. Otherwise, she'd have done something about it with the court or herself. He undoubtedly snapped that particular evening, maybe over just a simple thing, and you lose it. None of us are immune to that, in my belief and experience in life.
Attorney Grimes, I respect everything that you just said, and I agree that people do snap. However, the writing of the order with the judge and what apparently he had presented to him or her, I don't know if the judge is female or male, that should have been alarming. You know, the language that was used should have been alarming. It wasn't like this guy didn't have any incidents of having some kind of domestic issue at home. And that's where I'm at. No, of course, we all know of, jealousy killings or whatever. Like somebody walks in on a partner with somebody else and just loses it and just kills them. Well, we have evidence that that was a snap moment. But there's too much out there that this was not a snap moment for this man, but I don't know. But I appreciate that, and I'm going to hang up and let someone else call. Thank you.
I think every situation is different. I know that one of the cases that I handled early in my career, the husband I felt was extremely violent, and I never liked doing domestic relations. It was my first 4 or 5 years in the practice, and these were the type of cases that I didn't want to do anyway, but it was a way to generate growth and development of the law firm. But the one guy who I presented a case that he was extremely violent, I had photographs and I thought that at the conclusion of this case that he was going to kill his wife. And so I did everything possible to get restraining orders and things like that. And finally, divorce is finalized, and the judge hammered this guy. Child support, assets, you name it, attorney fees, East Slammer, everything 100% went in our favor. And I had put one of my police guys on alert to monitor her house because I thought he's going to come by and try to get her harm, right? And that was, I think, on a Thursday. On a Saturday, I ran into the husband in a local supermarket. And he saw me, and he came up to me, smiling, and I was getting ready to fight because I said, this fool's going to try to attack me. I'm about to take him out, right? He handed me a wad of cash and hugged me. Said, Mr. Lee, thank you. Everything you did was right, and I was wrong. I said, what? He said, yeah, I was wrong. I was a jerk, and I apologize. So in the most egregious case, what I perceive to be a violent individual, turns out that he ended up being a model ex-husband after the divorce. And so when people start looking at what happened in these court proceedings, folks, they're unpredictable.
Right.
They just are. And so the judges hear evidence, and I know that Renee had some problem with some of the ruling, but you never know because sometimes things just aren't what they appear to be, and sometimes they are.
Right.
That's my take on it. Now, moving on, there's a lot of other important news. Marlon, one of the things that I thought was critical was the Blum lawsuit against Congressional Black Caucus. What's that about?
Yes, I mean, this is just really sad. There is a man, Mr. Bloom, who has really made it his mission to, try to eradicate all affirmative action programs. He was involved in a number of cases that went to the United States Supreme Court and finally was successful in financing the litigation that did lead to the Supreme Court abolishing affirmative action. He's also been involved. Your listeners may remember the Fearless Fund, where corporate America set aside, money for Black female entrepreneurs and was successful in kind of killing that program. So now he set his sights on the Congressional Black Caucus that has minority scholarships, and he's in a lawsuit regarding that program. So, we certainly will continue to keep you posted on the developments in that lawsuit. But I think in addition to the lawyers fighting it, I think we need to do a better job in terms of advocating, why these programs are necessary, that, when there is no affirmative action, you can see the fruits of that in this administration, where there are people that aren't necessarily more qualified, a lot less qualified. You have a Department of Education secretary, didn't have a background in education. Pete Hecksteff wasn't a substantial general or have the traditional qualifications. So that's the reason we need it, because there's loopholes that are traditionally used for people that don't look like us to get opportunities. So we have to keep our eye closely on that litigation, Nathaniel and everyone.
Mm-hmm. Nate, can I just throw out something here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yesterday's paper headline that John Eastman, President Trump's attorney back when Biden won the election, he represented that Biden stole the election. If you guys remember, he's a former dean of a law school, Chapman Law School out here in California. Well, yesterday the California Supreme Court disbarred him a couple of days ago, and he's been disbarred. But an interesting thing that I thought of Marlon when I read the article is this. In this article where it talks about the state high court orders disbarment over 2020 election, it says, since re-entering the White House, Trump and his administration have repeatedly sought to downplay the violence of January 6th and rewrite the history of the attack. At the outset of his second term, Trump pardoned or commuted the sentences of more than 1,500 people who stormed the Capitol, repeatedly referring to them as, quote, hostages, end of quote. On Tuesday of this week, the Justice Department, Marlon, your former employer, on Tuesday, the Justice Department went a step further and asked a federal appeals court to throw out the seditious conspiracy convictions of Proud Boys and Oath Keepers leaders who were sentenced to prison terms for leading members of the far-right extremist group in the attack. So the Justice Department, Marlon, your former employer, is still trying to clear these people from January the 6th. And what do you think of that?
Oh, that's just, horrendous. I mean, there normally in normal times there should be a process. There's an office of pardon attorney where you have to, get input from the prosecuting attorneys to look at risk factors and all of that. By all accounts, by former people that worked in that office, is that they're just bypassing that and then just
Right.
making unilateral decisions. And people have to remember, in your audience, what these folks did. I mean, this was an overthrow of the government. This was an attempt to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. So not only do you have the Proud Boys, which are kind of a modern day Ku Klux Klan, but you have Stuart Rose, who is a Yale law graduate that was convicted of the conspiracy allegations. And it was enough to say that, hey, you're going to, a bridge too far to commute their sentence. But now to make sure that the record is wiped clean is certainly a bridge too far. But and that's why it's just really important that we cannot forget the history. We can't allow people to forget what really happened on January 6th and how many people's lives were at risk.
Well, that's terrible. And we're seeing a rapid decline in the growth and development of our young African American students and things like that. And it's very sad. And the fact that they're going around trying to eliminate these positions. And everybody forget that if you ever went to the House and the Senate, I used to regularly go through the offices, and one thing that was missing were Black folks. If I would go about 3 or 4 of the Republicans' DC offices there in the Capitol, and rarely if ever do you see any diversity. And so it's a slap in the face for the Blum lawsuit based on the fact that there's just so few opportunities. And I surmise if you went to the Capitol building today in the House and the Senate, and you start going through the Republican side, you'll probably be able to count the number of minorities with your fingers. It won't be a lot. But based on my personal experience, few if any that I ever would see when you went to the Capitol building way back, in 2010 to that time period Obama was there. I was a little bit more proactive, but that's what was missing. The idea of filing a lawsuit because the Congressional Black Caucus are trying to train our next generation is quite frankly insulting when you look at the reverse of that. And when they're doing these lawsuits, we have to have a better national strategy. When they file a lawsuit like that, we have to intervene and then you could sue all the people in the House and the Senate because they have no diversity. And so this is an important issue that most people maybe take lightly, but don't realize how consequential it is. When people are making decisions about our community, there's nobody in the room to give them input, to give them guidance as to what would be the appropriate cause of method of doing things, of cause of action. And that's my concern about this issue. Now, on a positive note, Marlon, Milton, Vanita, Victor Glover made history. Do you recall what happened in that situation, Marlon?
Yes, well, all the brothers of Phi Beta Sigma, hey, the buttons on our shirts are popping out, but we're just proud for, all African Americans. And I think the reason why it's also important is that your audience, Nathaniel, may recall the late Charlie Clerk made the comment that if he went on a airplane and saw a Black pilot, that, he would be nervous. And, he was, rightly chastised for that inappropriate statement. But there's a lot of people that feel that way. And, we just have to really celebrate, Mr. Glover. This man has 3 master's degrees. He's been in space before. And then we also have to look at the Black female, high-level NASA employees that were on the ground responsible for the safety of this mission and were a big part of success. So, we really need to trumpet that as a counterweight to these popular narratives by people like Charlie Kirk that talk about, hey, just because you see us in high-level positions, you automatically assume, unqualified when quite the opposite is true, especially looking at this whole NASA and the great success of that mission.
Hey, Milton, any closing comment?
No, I didn't mean to interrupt your talk about that lawsuit, but it's kind of surprised me that the Justice Department was behind the scenes trying to get these people cleared of what they did January the 6th. So we still got a fight ahead of us.
Benita, any closing comments?
Absolutely. And I understand that one of the individuals convicted in the January 6th taking over of the Capitol or insurrection is running for U.S. Congress. So more to follow about that. But in addition to the brilliance and intellect of the NASA astronauts, their strength was also tied very much to their diversity. And so there's strength in diversity, and diversity is strength. And this is an example of where we're seeing a diverse team produce a phenomenal result.
Well, thank you so much, my superstar panel. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you for listening to our show each week. I'd like to thank the people in South Florida. I did get your text about that prom in Pahokee. It was off the chart, a little bit ridiculous, but it was off the chart. Also, people here in Indianapolis, it's time to vote. Go out, early voting started. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll talk to you next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye now.
Have a great weekend.